Everyone, so here we go. We're going to go through a few slides first, as Donna's probably shared with you, and then I'll show you some reports, and then we'll have some questions at the end. Now, is my slideshow working? I've got one of those very slow computers today. It's going, I thought it was the weekend, I think. Let's see, here we go. Here we go. Okay, so well, let's get straight into it. So what we're going to show you here is that there's a couple of things that we've changed within the new report. So what we were finding is that some AP practitioners were using each of the spider graphs individually to go into the finer detail, and some but most weren't. So it was becoming quite a lot of data to kind of go through, and we wanted to kind of simplify it. So taking on feedback, we've been able to just use the overall one single spider graph snapshot that covers all of the capability areas. The standards questions are in the detailed section at the back though. And the reason we did that is because it would often look quite skewy on the spider graph, because we know that the standards need to be a 5 out of 5. And so we wanted to I suppose, put that in a different kind of visual representation. So we're just, as you can see, the first spider graph will be the only spider graph which covers the 5 domains of those capability sections. So the benefit of this is it says the feedback can be viewed as a whole, allowing you to connect the dots. And then we can see the correlations between the domains and the possible impact. And I'll share with you what the impact graph is in just a second. So how I go about this with people is that we open up with a spider graph. Same things we've done in the previous training that you learned. We ask the client to identify what they see are the strengths based on the gap sizes, and then we also ask them where they see the bigger gaps. So visually we can see it's just one space, and then we are able to then drill into the finer detail later in the actual coding or the actual numbers. The impact graph is a new thing here. Now this is really small. I can't really see that very well, unfortunately. But basically what we did is at the end of the survey, we're asking people, the raters, to say, what's the impact of their leadership having on you right now? And we'll ask things like how valued you feel, how listened you feel by the leader, whether you feel you know, that you can come to them with issues, etc. So that's really useful because, as you can see, I know you can't see the questions on the far left at the moment, but what you can see the bar graphs along the side, and we can kind of say, look, you know, overall you're between 4 and 5 in terms of the impact is looking pretty good, but there's some real standout things, and there's some things that you can work on as well. So that gives us you know how sometimes 360s can give you an idea of where the gaps are, but this shares with you what impact it's actually having on people from a leadership perspective. It includes responses to questions such as, in my interactions with X, I feel valued, I feel listened to, I feel motivated to work hard. So they're useful little questions to kind of feedback. I have to say that I tend to use those at the end of the debrief, although it's up to you how and when you use those. So I tend to go through all of the spider graph and then drill into the detail, do your usual VARs and everything to connect them with the information. And then at the end I say, look, let's look at, after everything that we've looked at, let's look at what impact your leadership is having on your raters. And then we kind of finish off with that. And to be honest, I haven't really had many, well, actually I did have one, a bit of a challenging one last week, which I'll share with you a little bit later. But most of them have got a pretty good impact graphs. So that's quite a good way to kind of end the confirmation of their leadership and how they're going, and highlighting their strengths as well. Okay, so the scale in the report has changed from 1, which was 1, none of the time, to 5, all of the time, to 3, some of the time, and 5, all of the time. Okay, so participants will still provide feedback based on the scale of 1 to 5. when they're filling in the survey, but the report will show just the results in the 3 to 5 scale. Okay, so as I said, I'll move that over there. What do the scores mean? You can see this little printout on the right hand side. I don't know if you can actually see my mouse swirling around there, but that's what will be printed on the actual report, which I'll go through a sample shortly. So we don't have you know, the full 1 to 5 on there anymore. So the reason being, this gives the results a lot more sensitivity with a gap size of 0.9 and above considered large. Okay, so you'll see the red when there's something, you know, above 0.9. Yeah. And then the 0.4 to 0.8 is the medium gap, or the orange, and the 0 to 0.3 is being small, or a green gap. So the reason we've changed that is because, as I said before, it allows a lot more sensitivity. But I will explain something when we read the report, what we need to just watch out for with that shortly. So there's a few nicknames that have changed in the report. It now includes an index at the back instead of the domain shortcuts at the end of each question. So again, I'm going to show you that in just a second. So, you know, when sometimes people, when you're doing a debrief and people go, oh, what does that mean? You can now actually go to the back and have a look at what each of the you know, questions and the domain actually means, so that you can feel a lot more confident with it. And please know that I get asked that question all the time, and I go, I don't know, let's go and find out what that is. Even though I wrote them and put them together, I still don't know the questions, and I don't know, you know, every single fine detail. So that's okay for you to not know it off by heart. It's just knowing where to find it if you are asked those questions. So the capability areas listed on the spider graph snapshots are nicknames. So you'll need to familiarise yourself with those and refer to the index to see the full question name when and if it's asked or required. All right, so I'm going to share a report with you. See if I can unshare this now. Oh, bear with me. Stop sharing. Okay. 1 second, we'll see where it is. I had them all up here before I started, and now I don't know where they are. Closed them down, 1 sec. Donna, if you're online, can you come and help me, please? I'm stuck. Can you all see the impact graph in front of you now? Okay. So this is the example of the impact graph, which is the only one I can find right now, so I'll figure that out. So the impact graph, as you can graph here, you can see ask the following questions. So just have a little read through those. So you can see with this person down the bottom, some of the time, right up through to all of the time, I feel more confident, changes will be made for the better, I feel listened to. So this sheet comes as a separate printout, so they won't be included in the actual workbook. And the reason for that is you might want to be a little bit strategic about when you share that bit of information. As I said before, I use it at the end, but some people can't resist it and they want to scan through and go, what's this now? And so that's why I reckon it's useful to have it to hand at the end, and go through it at that point as well. So no kind of surprises there about what all that looks like or how you would interpret that data. Now, let's see if I can now show you this. Can you see this now? It says, sorry.
Abby, could I just ask you a question on that?
Sure.
The impact, is that include all respondents?
Yes.
Including, yep, so it's not just their direct reports, it's their peers, it's their manager as well included?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So it's everyone. Sorry, guys, I just need, can you see, does it say name your Silka feedback or not? You still see that? You can see that? Great. Excellent. So here is the report. So with the report, it looks a little bit fresher, as you can see. And we're going to scan through the usual disclaimer, etc. there. The usual results, you can see who's filled it in and the amount of people. So all that's the same, as you can see, the top 5 areas, etc. Just want to remind you, and some of you are really good at identifying this, that these are, again, computer printouts. So there might be more than 5 strengths or more than 5 developmental areas. So just, again, try not to just hone in on these ones if you're doing the debrief. Okay, so here's your overall kind of snapshot for this person here. Again, nothing new to you, just knowing that there's a few of the nicknames have changed, and this is the only kind of spider graph that you're going to see at this point. Okay, any questions at all?
Abby, one of the things I was wondering, have you thought about numbering those different areas at all as another way to kind of support with that cross-referencing?
So numbers in terms of like leading cell 1, leading cell 2?
Yeah.
No, I don't know if I'm maybe is the question, to answer your question, because the org psychs work around how that looks from the back end, from the platform position.
Yeah.
So I could ask them about that. I know we've tried to simplify it because it was looking so busy.
Yeah. It's I know it's one of those those balancing acts, but having keeping it at 1.5, 1.2, 1.3, it just really helps with the flicking backwards and forwardsing between the back to reference. But yeah, I know it's a balance between such a small amount of space that's required. But
yeah, it's always a work in progress. So whatever recommendations you guys have is always helpful.
Yeah, but if you were to keep it have the 5 domains and do the 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, so you can still go, that's the first, that's the second. It's I've just found it helpful previously, but whatever works best for you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thanks. All right, I'm going to scroll down a little bit further. You've seen all this this bit before as well. I tend, those of you I've done debriefs with, you'll know I tend not to use this page, whereas some of my colleagues do. I think, again, it just reinforces how the computer has chosen the top 5 strengths and the top 5 areas for development. But as you can see this one here and this one, these 3, they're actually all quite the same. So that's why I say just be careful not to just take the first 5 or the last 5 because there's much more to it than that. But you can see the ranking still. And that's the 5 areas to kind of focus on or improvement. So that's all part of the same, the similar one that you've seen before. We can see here that, you know, the gap sizes, again, this is what I wanted to draw your attention to, because when you look at this, you go, oh, shivers, this is going to be an interesting debrief, isn't it? You can see the number of large gaps. And because we've changed the sensitivity, we are going to see a lot more larger gaps and medium gaps because of that sensitivity change. So I want to explain that, and what I explain to the people that I'm debriefing is, okay, now, as you can see, there looks like a lot of red there. What comes up for you? And usually they go, oh my gosh, like, you know, I've got a lot to develop. And go, yeah. And let's put it into perspective here. So anything with a gap of 1 is going to show up as a large gap. However, we want to drill into the detail in a minute and look at where those gaps, or what size those gaps actually are. And so what I mean by that is, if someone has a gap between a rating of 4, and, you know, so that's most of the time, but they'd like them to be 5, which is all of the time, that will come up as a red gap. However, we also know that what we'll want to really hone in on is if there's a gap of, say, a 2 to a 3 or 3 to a 4, because what that's saying is, you know, they're rarely like that, or they're sometimes like that, and they'd like them to be higher. So that's an area to focus on more than, say, the 4 to 5. I hope that's clear. So what we then do is what we said before, we drill into the detail. So as we can see, this one here, self-care, the person's saying it's a 4 and they'd like it to be a 5. Now, yes, it's a large gap. However, it's a bit different to say something down here, which is, you know, how they're coping with stress. It's down, peers are saying it's a 3.8, want it to be a 4.8. You know, this one here is a 3 to a 5. So really wanting to get and understand where those bigger gaps lie from a lower range or from a lower starting point. Any questions at this point? I want to scan through and find a spot that we can hone in on.
Abby, I suppose I'm just still a little bit confused as to why the 1 and the 2 are in the assessment, not in the report.
Why the 1 and the 2 are not in the report?
Yeah, even though when you do the assessment, you fill it out like there is 1 and 2 there. Is that what you said when you?
Oh yeah, so they're still there. It's just in terms of what we kind of report on. So let's say, for example, the someone gets a report done and there are lots of 2s, then we'll actually look at changing the scale. So you know how with this one up here, if I bring it up here a little bit, this person here has not scored anything under a 3. Yeah, so we know we start the scale from there. However, if we're finding that there's a lot of 2s, then we will start the score. We'll change that scale. Although, you know, so I don't know if that's making sense. What we're really just trying to show is that we've taken the big 1 to 5 scale out of the actual report and just said 3 to 5, just so they can see the difference between it. It's a really fine detail.
So if someone is scoring 1s and 2s,
yep,
a lot of the time,
yep,
and the desired is 3, 4 or 5 or 4 or 5,
yep.
So this will be individually tailored then, so that
Yes.
1s and 2s, okay, but it's the actual reporting range within 3 that allows you to have that sort of more accurate reporting.
Yeah, if we started this report, for example, with this person here as a 1 to 5, we wouldn't see very big gaps. I don't know if that's clear, but so for this particular, we want it to actually see, you want to actually see the difference and show the sensitivity between the numbers. But you're right, if there's 1s and 2s, then we will change the scale so that you can see where those differences are.
Well, if there's 1s and 2s and desired is 5, you're going to see that gap anyway. The sensitivity will already be there.
That's right.
Yeah, that explains it. Thanks for that. Yeah.
No worries. Somehow I've got rid of all of your faces, so I have no idea who said what then. So, Donna, if you are in the room next door still listening, please come and help me, because I'd love to be able to see everyone's faces.
Abby, it's Catherine.
Hi,
I just wanted to make an observation. So I think that ability to adjust is excellent, because you can, when you do get those scales, I get it, where there's only gaps 1 or less, people can be having this sense of, oh, I'm doing completely fine, so I don't need to worry about it. So I do really, really see that value in actually bringing the scale down so you can see those gaps at a larger level.
Yeah.
One of the initial observations that I am making, and I totally get the team that you have working behind this, that is looking at the opportunity perhaps for 1, given that gap in 1 is a common kind of rating that you will get, someone going from say a 4 to a 5 or a 3 to 4, of having that gap of exact 1 as being still in that medium range, because a gap from one to then a gap to 2, so a gap from 3 to 4 to a gap from like 2 to 4 is a huge gap. And just in terms of recognizing that when people go into a 360, there's a heightened level of sensitivity that they already have. And I can imagine that all that red is going to be really triggering. And by having 1 as that red, I think to me it kind of makes sense to up to 1, including 1 to still be in the medium. And that's going to still be highlighting and pulling out those really big areas of focus. But where it's 1, I just think the benefit of that being presented in an orange still is amplifying that, hey, this is something that we need to look at, but is reducing that when you look at that bigger picture of going, oh my goodness, there's so much red there.
Yeah, I see what you mean. The challenge is, say, and this is why we've changed it a little bit, is so if someone scores a 3 and they'd like them to be a 4,
yeah,
that's actually a pretty darn big gap.
Yeah.
Because 3 to 4, so 3 is saying they sometimes do it, but we'd like them to do it most of the time. And likewise, if it's they rarely do it, but we'd like them to do them some of the time.
Yeah.
There's a really big developmental area there.
Yeah.
Where it's not as strong, as I was saying before, is when it's a 4 to 5, because they're doing it most of the time. So we've struggled with knowing how to visually represent this as well, and that's why I spend a fair bit of time helping people understand that during the debrief.
Yeah.
And that's why, and personally, I use this section here more so, because you can see the bigger gaps here, and this is not uncommon, are often their own perceptions.
Yeah.
And so we can see, and look, one of the things to just note, Susan and I went through some silkers the other day, and you know, if there's really large gaps, then it won't even show up on this. Like if there was a 3, it would run off the page, and so you just number 3, which you would have seen that before. So that's why we have to, as practitioners, really make sure we're studying this table. I totally agree with you, and that's why I was saying, you know, when they see those gap, the previous one, these ones here, people go, oh, and that's what to really reassure people and help them understand what the meaning is. So I don't have the absolute solution for you there, Catherine.
No, it's just an observation. Yeah, it's just helpful to understand the thinking around that. Yeah.
And because people were kind of going initially, all right, a 1.5 gap, but when we were drilling into the detail, we're going, actually, that's a pretty big gap when someone's down at a 2 and wants to be at a 3. You know, so it's, but again, take it on, and it's something that we can continue to look at, and maybe there's a way of looking at different shades of red or something like that. I don't know, it would be less shocking. So going back to this again, as I say, you should know this already, I'm sure, but when people ask me, oh, how do I, what does this mean? I'm scanning all over the place, sorry. when people go, oh, what's coordinate services mean? So this one here under leading purpose. And what's the question around that? And you go, oh God, I don't know. You know, from what you know that it comes under leading purpose. So what I do is I go straight to the section around where these bits are. So I look for leading purpose. Here we go. And I look at coordinating services, which is here. Okay, so that will tell me exactly what the question is, that I can tell straight away to the actual participants so that they know what I'm talking about and what the actual question is. Okay, so that's a bit of a cheat, not a cheat, but it's a bit of a trick for you to know how to scan and go to that quickly, because all of these, of course, are in order of domain. Okay. So you can see here's an example of this one here, setting realistic goals, where you can see, you know, this person, you know, says that they're a 4 and would like to remain at a 4, that they think they're doing a pretty good job. And then we can see the direct manager, there's a 4 and a 5. And then we get down to the direct reports, there's a 3.5 to 5. So we can see that that's a really important area for us to focus on. It's most important for those direct reports, but it's also, even though it doesn't come up as a strength for, sorry, it doesn't come up as a gap for this person in particular, there are some concerns for the raters. Okay, so normally what we would have seen before is oranges there, and so we might not hone in on those as much. That makes sense. So this is an area to focus on. And I'll just show you, scanning forward. Oops, past it. This is now where the aged care standards are. And again, some people liked the spider graph for that, spider graph for the aged care standards. And a lot of people didn't. They thought it wasn't relevant because there's always going to be a 5 out of 5. We need to have, as a standard, it needs to be 5 out of 5. So this allows us to kind of hone into these specific results to know exactly where the detail is and where we need to focus on. Now, while I've got you and I've got a captive audience for a minute, one thing I'm going to just mention to you is the more data that we're looking through with the SILCA, the more data that we're working with, because as you know, a lot of the SILCAs are done at the executive level and the facility manager level, and we're starting to do and see organisations doing more of a test or an assessments on the RN and EN levels. And so what we are finding that although executive and facility managers and even deputies are actually showing less gaps in the standards, the ENs and RNs are showing higher gaps in those standards. Okay, so I'm really passionate about this finding, because this is where, you know, a lot of organisations are saying, you know, we're getting unmet, or we're you know, unfortunately getting some sanctions, and it's around a particular standard. We really need to be testing those frontline leaders, because they're the ones giving the direct care. So I encourage you to have conversations with your clients around that, because that might really help them to detect and have some early warning flags or signs about sites that that need some development or some support.
Abby, can I just jump in there on that? We've just gone through, I think we've just done 14 of our own, and there's some, it's really interesting because the expectation from some of the teams are that, you know, it's okay to be a 4 or even a 3, or it doesn't apply NA on these standards, which is really an interesting thought process, because you know, my expectation is that everything should be a 5. That's what we should be expecting to meet those standards, because they're a minimum standard. So it's an interesting discussion when I do my debriefs that I'll be having with the teams around, you know, what is their expectation? Why did they rate their expectation at a 3 or a 4 rather than a 5? And or why do they believe in their role that that particular standard isn't applicable to their position? So it's just really quite an interesting graph when you start looking, or chart when you start looking at it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Susan. I think one of I was debriefing a nurse the other day, and see if I can find an example of where it would be. Whoops. It's around, it was around kind of a different area. It wasn't around the standards, but it probably links into one of them, but it was around budgets and, you know, maintaining the resources, and the nurse said, oh, but that's not my job. It was just interesting to kind of say, well, hang on, you do, you know, order equipment, don't you, and supplies, and, you know, count and make sure a certain amount of supplies are at each site. Is that your job? But it's interesting, the mindset behind it is that isn't my role. So I think the more that we drill into that level of detail with people and challenge some of that thinking, help them see themselves as part of those, as that being part of their job, is really critical, because it probably wouldn't come out in discussion any other time. So yes, again, you can see here, this is an example of someone who feels as though they're not managing the risks well. We know that from your training, or you will know from your training, sorry, that despite other people thinking that they're doing pretty well, if this person thinks they're doing it some of the time, they probably know more than their raters. So we need to be understanding, what's your block, or why do you think you're only at a 3? What's happening? And whilst you want to be at a 4, this is a standard that needs to be a 5 out of 5. So let's understand that and unpack it a lot more. So that's the detail there for the standards, and then here's the little cheat sheet at the back. Okay, so this is a bit of a key that will help you kind of, again, understand, and they're in alphabetical order. So the keywords that are around the graph, the spider graph, sorry, you can kind of go to each of those and kind of say, okay, what is the actual question around effective time, effectively manages time? Okay, so that helps us understand what the question is. So this is another way of using and interpreting the question, or finding the information for those questions. It just depends how you want to use it. So some people will use this. I've trained myself, which isn't necessarily the right way, but it is a way to actually go to the actual data and the detail in those tables to find out the actual question too. So I just feel like I've just speed chatted to you all about the new changes. I'm keen to hear any other feedback or any other questions that any of you have about this.
Abby, I did send a little private message to Donna because you were busy. The real dot goals is not in the back there. I was trying to find it. The realistic goals, it's not there.
Really? Thank you so much.
That's okay. I'm going to the standards. What I find interesting here is, while we know that we want the standards to all be 5,
yep,
there are a lot who are accepting desired performance under that.
That's right.
So that to me is a very significant element that could be brought to a management level.
Spot on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, if this was a group of people that are doing a leadership program, then that aggregate data would be presented as well.
Yep.
So we'd be able to, and you can often get an individual spider graph made of the aggregate standards questions or results. And then that says to the organisation, we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or there's some sort of communication that's not happening, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually like the simplified version.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. I think it's good. The other question I had was, if there is a gap of 3, you said that would be off the chart. Sorry,
everyone's going off now.
Sorry. If there is a gap of 3, how does that get managed in the report?
Can you see where my cursor is at the moment?
Yes.
It's one of those things that we can't figure out yet from a platform level, how we make that show up like this. So When I first saw it, I went, oh, somehow the platform hasn't worked and it's left off the bar graph. Well, it's because it's too big, so it kind of puts the 3 here.
Sorry, I'll turn my phone off.
So
I don't know if you heard that.
So what I've been talking to people about in their training and going through, it doesn't make a difference whether it's the new report or not. I really recommend that when you get the results of the report, that you're going through and looking at this column in each of them and just seeing where the low kind of scores are, and then same over here. Yeah, so that you can really drill into the detail and make a few notes, even cross-reference to the learning guide, the self-development guide, etc. Yeah. Any other questions? And thank you so much for noticing that. I'll write that down, and well, you've sent that as a message as well, so we've got that. Realistic goals. Anyone else?
Abby, yeah, I was just going to say that I actually think that's really helpful, taking all the individual graphs out front.
Good.
I find people can get really caught up stuck in the detail of that it's really hard to move them back to big picture and that. So having those two, I think, balance each other out really well. It's a good change. Yeah.
All right, that's great, because I know some people really love them, and so that kind of. But it's also, you can still drill into the detail more, so actual results.
Exactly. And it makes it easy to flick back to, well, let's look at the graph and then let's go back to the detail. But so otherwise there's lots of time spent flicking through the report.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Cool. So look, the same is with the Hilka. Okay, so what you've seen in Silka is going to be the same with the Hilka. So those of you who are accredited in the Hilka, which is for the health industry, it's the same layout. It's the same report layout with the same key at the back, the same reporting. So there's no differences, compared to the Silka and the Hilka. Obviously, the questions are different, the nicknames and the standards, but how we've laid it out in the report, it's the same. It's all the new report.
Abby, on Dropbox, I know you've got some marketing material. So is that being altered to reflect?
Yes. Yeah, sure is. And if Donna's on the line, she might be able to answer some of those questions as well, because she manages all the Dropbox file. And I don't know if she is. She's probably not. That's okay.
Okay. Dropbox is it's pretty easy to access, and that's all right. I'm sure that'll be followed up. That's no problem.
Yeah, so everything's getting all revamped, but keep your questions and your suggestions coming, because the more that people use it, you will see things that we don't always see. So we'll take that feedback on.
Abby, what is the uptake of Hilka in industry as against Silka?
Not as high at the moment. I think there's a lot more focus on Silka, and we're really trying to encourage Siska. So I don't know how comfortable everyone is about talking about Siska to their clients or to their partners, but as I say, the data that's coming out of the Silkas is really look, it's exciting from a data collection point because we're seeing some trends, but we're also seeing some pretty alarming trends as well. So we really need to get site and staff capability measured to know exactly where those kind of red flags are. But we are doing HISCAs, so the Siska in the health industry, doing a bit more of that across some teams. Look, I think for whatever reason, Silka seems to be a bit more popular.
We've been, I guess, with I'll add to that. Sorry, Abby. Yes, with Silka in particular, we've been successful in establishing relationships with the key peak bodies. So I think that's helped us in terms of brand awareness, and both of those, AXA and Laser, are now using Silk as a part of their leadership program as well. So, you know, we've got them as good advocates for us. The healthcare industry is structured a bit differently. It doesn't necessarily have those peak bodies that aged care has. So, you know, our ability to, I guess, broaden our brand awareness is a bit more limited there, but certainly there's key applications for us that we're still going to explore in that market, that's for sure.
Yeah. While I've got everybody online as well, I just thought I'd share with you a bit of a challenge that we experienced last week, where it relates to that impact graph I was telling you about. So you know how you usually start off a debrief and someone was kind of, and you kind of build a relationship and ask a little bit more about people's roles and how they're going and things like that, and get a little bit of content. What's your relationship like with your raters, just to kind of help work that into the feedback. And we had a situation last week where a girl kind of really opened up about some of the real challenges that she was experiencing as a fairly new person in the organisation, and she was very, very emotional, and to be honest, her results were incredibly confronting, and it wouldn't have gone down very well, and her I suppose her level of coping wasn't very high. So I think as practitioners, we need to make sure that we make a call on whether it's the appropriate time to give a debrief or not for people, especially if it's confronting. So her impact graph was incredibly low, very low. And so we made the call that we didn't have time. We said, look, you know, we need to have adequate time to be able to give you that debrief. You know, the other part of it is to check in to see if you're feeling resilient about receiving feedback, because it often can be really confronting. And she, in partnership with us, chose to not have that debrief that day. And so I think we need to just be mindful of that as practitioners, to make sure that we're checking in with people's willingness to take it on. Yeah, that bit of a duty of care. So it's not to say that we can't eventually give them that feedback, but it's just when we do it. And, you know, I might even, if I'm thinking about it, might even not even show that impact graph, you know, because that's separate. I might not even show that when it's appropriate to make that call, whether we show that or not as well. It's really, remember, it's a tool to use for a conversation.
Had she seen the results at all?
No.
Okay, so you saw them and you called that, and knowing her state of mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are working with her on a weekly basis though, so we know that we'll support her and be able to give her that feedback at some point when she's ready. So I just think, you know, a learning from that is sometimes starting with that and just saying, look, feedback can be often quite confronting. And so while some people really enjoy it, some people find it pretty upsetting, and sometimes it depends on how we're feeling at the day. So I need to check in with you, how you're feeling about receiving feedback, and et cetera, et cetera. And then, you know, sometimes, and hopefully people be fairly honest like she was, to say, actually, I'm not resilient at the moment. Okay, got it. Let's do this another time. So yeah, it might be a bit more of a challenge if you're employed by an organisation to just do debriefs all in one day with a bunch of people, but I still think duty of care we have in delivering results, to just make sure that that people are okay to receive them. And if they do have a upsetting reaction to the debrief, or to the results, I should say, making sure that we follow up with them as well. You know, I can see this has been a bit of an upsetting, you know, information for you, you know, and do the checking in of, you know, what's the next steps? What do you think you need? I'd like to follow up with you tomorrow, or whatever, whatever's right. You know, we're not counsellors, we're not employed to be counsellors or psychologists, but we do need to just check in, because we have often been the bearer of some pretty strong information. It's very rare, but just equipping yourself with those skills is important too. Any other comments or questions about anything that we've talked about today? Does anyone have any other questions about whether it's, you know, any partners that you're working with, or any other challenging debriefs you've had, or anything like that that would be helpful for now? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for tuning in to that session. Sorry about the technical difficulties. We got there in the end. Yeah, all the best with your weekend and Easter and everything. We hope to speak to you soon.
Thanks, Abby.
Thanks, Abby. See you all.
Thank
See
you
you
so
later.
much. Bye.